So we're going to get started with the second module of our first aid class. I'm Ellen Edmondson. I'm a nurse practitioner and a nurse midwife, and I'm doing a series of instructions on first aid. In preparation for doing these classes, I took a number of first aid classes given by people in the prepper communities. So this is going to be on protecting your health through proper sanitation. And this is more important than learning how to set a broken arm or cure an infection, because this is what's going to prevent infection and illness in the first place. And you'll see that my logo is a little bit dated because we've changed the name of our group. We used to be Urban Survival Group International. We're now Community Preparedness Group International. So we'll update this presentation eventually. So globally, diarrhea is the most common illness in all age groups. Now that doesn't apply so much in our country, but it definitely applies in places like South and Central America, Africa, India, China. And it is the second leading cause of death for children under the age of 5. We are so blessed in this country that we can turn on our tap and our water is safe to drink, relatively speaking. We don't have to worry that we're going to get sick if we drink it, although we may be exposed to toxic chemicals that are in our water system just because of environmental contamination. So I'm not really addressing toxic chemicals, although of course that is a huge issue with clean water, clean drinking water. I'm really addressing things like bacteria and protozoa and parasites that can cause serious human illness. And those are illnesses, things like cholera, dysentery, and other types of illnesses like that. Now in our survival group, our urban community preparedness group, we have something called the 5 pillars of preparedness, and those are water, food, shelter, energy, and security. And water is one of the 5 pillars, so it's a very important system. And when you have a system as important as water, it has to be a redundant system, which means that you have more than one way to obtain water and more than one way to make it safe for drinking. Now, people who have homes or pods that have wells may very well be able to use their well water for drinking purposes. It's important that you make sure that your well water is potable or drinkable. And to do that, you should have it tested. You can purchase test kits of your own, and I've got something up here on the whiteboard. Lehman's, L-E-H-M-A-N-S, is the Amish Sears. So Lehman's is an amazing store in Ohio that caters to the Amish community. And you can get anything there that will allow you to sew, have light, cook off-grid. And Lehman sells a water kit, a basic water kit that tests for bacteria and heavy metals. It's $49. You can get a more expansive kit that tests for toxic chemicals as well, and that's a $200 kit. So you can send away for that and test your well water to make sure that it's potable water, potable, drinkable water. And then, of course, you have to consider how are you going to get your water out of your well if the grid is down. If you depend on an electric pump to pump water up out of the ground, you have to have an alternative to that. There are lots of solar pumps that you can buy. You have to install a solar system and have a special pump to do that. Or you can have a hand pump installed. And if any of you have been out to my farm, you'll have seen I have a 125-foot well with a hand pump, and I have solar power as well to run the electric pump. So again, that just shows you that systems need to have the redundancy there because they're such vital systems. Now for people who are storing water, and I know that Lee and Delon have some 250-gallon containers where they're storing water. If you're storing municipal water from the tap, that's going to be safe to drink. It has to be treated to keep it safe, but that's relatively simple and easy to do. And you have to exclude insects, particularly mosquitoes, because any water, mosquitoes, if they can find a way in, they're going to find a way in and lay their larvae in there. So you don't want to have your stored water. That's how you're going to provide water for yourself and your family. You don't want your stored water to be accessible to insects. Other people may prefer to collect rainwater, and we can do that in Pinellas County. Our annual rainfall is 52 inches a year. That is a lot of water. And you can store rainwater and use that for drinking. Of course, that water is going to have to be purified in some way. Rainwater is not safe to drink unless you treat it. And if you ever want to do a really neat field trip, go to Gamble, G-A-M-B-L-E plantation. It's just a little ways away in Waimama. Gamble is a plantation that was built in the very early 1800s, pre-Civil War, and it was a sugarcane plantation. And they have the original cistern is still operational there. And the plantation collected rainwater off the roof of the home and stored it in this cistern. And it probably stores, I don't know, tens of thousands of gallons.
Wow.
So this is something we can do in Florida. Building a cistern is not a simple thing, but it isn't rocket science either. So, did you have a question? A cistern is a concrete or stone container that is usually below ground or partially below ground that is used for water storage. So rainwater collection is a way to obtain water. Other people are going to use surface water, and that's things like ponds, lakes, and streams. Obviously, that water must be treated to be safe to drink. So we're going to talk now about some of the ways that we can treat our water.
Ellen?
Yes.
May I ask, what about, a lot of us have swimming pools. Can we use the pool water?
The question is, can we use swimming pool water for drinking? And yes, you can. It's got a lot of chlorine, and it depends on how you've treated it and what you've treated it with. But swimming pool water that's treated with chlorine, you can drink it. Okay, because that chlorine, if the water sits in a container, it's going to outgas, and the concentration will go down.
I want to make a mention on particularly outdoor swimming pools. And we have chemtrails, so you have a lot of heavy metals, aluminum, barium, and strontium, which is very significant at this particular juncture. So in addition to your chlorine, you have that. So you definitely need to filter your swimming pool
Yeah,
to address those heavy metals.
Winston's making a comment here that there are some risks for heavy metals that are precipitating from the sky, from the air, as a result of contamination of the air, and that you have to make allowances for that too. And I'm sure, Winston, you have ways of treating that for the chemicals.
Not all, because some of the metals are nanotized.
Okay.
And so because they're nanotized, I don't really know how to take that out.
So Winston's comment here is that some metals are removable depending on the size of the particle. Now, if you're using rainwater, surface water, water that has particulates in it that you can look and see, you're going to have to filter it, do a particulate filter first. That is easy to do. Many people have bandanas in their bug-out bags. A bandana is perfectly acceptable for water filtration. You just put it over the top of the bucket, you pour the water through it, the bandana will collect the particles. You can also use coffee filters. Those make excellent particle filters. You just want to make sure you have the device that's going to be filtered into is going to hold and fit your coffee filter. And cheesecloth is another excellent filter medium. And you can buy this stuff, it's dirt cheap, and it makes an excellent, excellent filter. So particulate filtration. Also, just incidentally, we talked in previous classes about the amazing moringa tree and how you can use the moringa has many purposes, many things that you can do with the leaves. And moringa seed, which I have abundance of, can be crushed in a mortar and pestle and thrown in a bucket of muddy water, opaque water, and it will flocculate or collect all those particles, and they'll precipitate down to the bottom of the bucket, and then you can pour off your clear water that way. So particulate filtration. After you get the particles out, you've got to clean the water of bacteria and parasites. And you can do that with a commercial filter, and I've got a couple different ones here. The British Birkefeld, or the Berkey, is sort of the gold standard of water filtration. and also Katadyn. This is a Katadyn.
How is that spelled? How's Katadyn spelled?
Katadyn. Katadyn. These use the filter element in these devices is a ceramic filter, and there are 3 in each of these. These will filter down to about 0.5 to 0.3 microns, and that's enough filtration to remove most bacteria and parasites. It will not remove virus. If you want to remove virus from water, you've got to get a filter that's about 0.1 microns. I don't think anybody makes a filter that will take virus out of water. Do Winston? No, Winston says no. These are reusable to a degree. They can be cleaned with a scrubby pad and reused to the point of filtering about 3,000 gallons. But after that, they're done. They're filled up. They will no longer filter your water. These are not cheap. This is a $55 filter on Amazon, and you need 3 of them. So if you're going to use devices like this to filter your water, make sure you stockpile some of these so that you have the capability of doing that for a while. So those are the commercial filters. Now, you know what I did not pass out is a handout. And David, I'm going to take a few minutes and pass this handout out to everybody that's here.
What is that silver one there that you're?
That's the Berkey.
This is the Berkey. This is the Berkey. Berkeys come in many sizes. Now this is good for a family of 3 or 4. But if you've got a bigger group, you've got to have a much bigger filter because they do about 2 gallons. These little filters, 2 gallons an hour.
Could you show us the internal of the Berkey?
Yeah, I'm going to show you the internal of the Katadyn because I've got the filters loaded in the Katadyn.
Okay.
So you've got 3 ceramic filters that are loaded in here, and you pour your water in this top of it. The water penetrates the filter and filters down into the base where you can then dispense it. So that's how they work. There's a filtration chamber and there's a water collection chamber.
So that's the same thing basically how they work.
They're all the same. Any filter like this, it's a ceramic gravity filter, is going to have this basic construction. You can also buy what are called the black Berkeys. They're filters that have ceramic and charcoal. So they're going to filter out toxic chemicals, and you know that charcoal can do that. The ceramic filter is not going to filter out if there's benzene in the water. It's not going to filter it out. But a charcoal filter will. So the problem with the charcoal filter is once it gets wet, it's good for 6 months, and then that's it. And so you better have a lot of them if you're going to be filtering with that type of filter. Yes.
But there is a little trick in case for emergency. This is a good piece of data in that you can soak your used charcoal filter in 3% hydrogen peroxide for overnight, like 10, 12 hours, and it will help purge it and bring back life to it quite significantly.
And Winston's comment was that you could soak a charcoal filter in 3% hydrogen peroxide overnight, and that will, to a degree, recharge your charcoal filter, so you might be able to extend its lifespan. Now, in your handout, you are going to see there's 2 filters there that you can construct from materials that you have on hand. The first one is a charcoal filter, and to make a charcoal filter, you need granulated charcoal. This is readily available. It's not cheap, but it's not horribly expensive. A 20-pound pail of granulated charcoal is about $100, and that will last you a long time. You also need pea gravel, just plain old gravel, but smaller size. And you need sand. Coarse sand, it has to be clean sand, like a builder's construction sand. And using these 3 elements, charcoal, sand, and gravel, you can make a filter that will filter out bacteria and parasites. So you don't have to invest $700, $800, $1,000, and $210 in filters to do it this way, you can build a filter. And I like this because it makes it more doable. It makes it more something that you can do without having a lot of expensive equipment if you stockpile the raw materials to do it yourself. And then the next filter is called a slow sand filter. And that doesn't even require charcoal. That just requires sand and gravel. How easy is that? You just have to have the buckets to do it in and the know-how to do it properly. Because remember, if you don't do it right, people will get sick. What do you want to say about that, about filtration? Okay, so that's filtration as a way of purifying water. Now the next thing is purification, and you have a lot of different ways to do that, and I'll take my next slide. This is in your handout. It doesn't have the logo and stuff. And I left all of these things loose because this is something you might want to laminate and put in a notebook so that you have it as a reference. You don't need any filtration at all other than possibly particulate filtration. You can still purify the water and make it drinkable. Boiling is one method. And boiling is great, but it has big drawbacks. You need fuel. Some of your water is going to evaporate. The Red Cross says you boil it for 1 minute, but I've done a lot of reading on this, and you see a lot of different time limits for boiling, anywhere from 1 minute to 20 minutes. And the consensus seems to be that if you boil water for 10 minutes, you're going to remove bacteria and cryptosporidium, which are little tiny parasitic spores. You're going to remove the stuff that makes people sick. I wouldn't use boiling as a purification method, except maybe if you were trying to make a sterile solution to irrigate a wound, perhaps, or to make infant formula. If you've got a little infant, boiling is going to be your best guarantee of cleaning that water, making sure it's really safe for that infant without adding chemicals in it like chlorine or iodine. The gold standard for purifying water is plain old chlorine bleach. Just plain old Clorox, not the springtime scent Clorox. You don't want that stuff. You just want plain old Clorox. And it tells you right how many drops per gallon, how long you wait before the water is safe to drink. The problem with liquid chlorine bleach is that it is not shelf stable. In 6 months, instead of being 6% chlorine bleach, this is 3%. In a year, it's water or close to it. So this is good to have, but remember that for long-term water purification, liquid chlorine bleach is not going to be workable. Your option is this stuff. This is Pool Shock. It is calcium hypochlorite, 68% in this case, and you can make liquid chlorine bleach from this stuff. And there's your formula. 1/4 ounce, 1 round teaspoon per 2 gallons makes a 6% bleach solution. Then you just use it like you would liquid chlorine bleach. This is shelf stable, 4 to 10 years. The problem with this is that it is a chemical and it is volatile. So you have a handout in there that tells you how to safely use this. You got to know what you're doing if you're using this stuff and storing this stuff. Number one, don't get it wet, because as soon as it gets wet, it gets reactive. It will outgas chlorine gas if you get it wet. So, and that could mean that there's a little pinhole in the bag and the humidity of Florida gets in here, and you've got this stored with your food supplies, and all of a sudden, all your nice food tastes like chlorine. It's also corrosive. So don't store it in a metal container, and don't store it with your good machete or your, because it's going to corrode it. If you mix if this and ammonia mix, it creates a poisonous gas. So it can't be stored under the sink where you store ammonia. And if this and gasoline get next to each other, it goes boom. Now, only, I mean, if you sat this bag next to a can of gas, it wouldn't go boom. But if there was a hole in this bag and there was some chlorine gas leaking out and your gas tank is making fumes, whammo. So you got to know what you're doing with this. And it is on, that's on your, there's a little handout there that tells you about this. And I researched a lot of different sources as to how to make liquid chlorine bleach from pool shock. And this is good. This formula has been validated by the EPA. You know, that they're not all bad, these government agencies. And they do studies to see if bacteria grows in water that's treated with this, and it doesn't. So pool shock is a good thing to put in your survival stores because you can make liquid chlorine bleach to purify water and for sanitation. You can make a 10% bleach solution for sanitation with it. The next item that you can use to purify water is plain old 2% tincture of iodine. And I suggest that everybody have a couple of bottles of this. This is a lot easier to carry in your bug out bag than a bottle of chlorine bleach. It works really good. There are skull and crossbones on here because the FDA makes them manufacturers put it on there. Iodine is not a poison. It is a vital ingredient for human life, human and animal life. So this 2% tincture of iodine, make sure it's just in plain alcohol. Some manufacturers put it in ammonia. You'll know right away when you open the bottle that it's in you don't want that. You want it in alcohol. 12 drops per gallon, 30 minutes. It's stable for 4 years if unopened, 1 year if open, but this is dirt cheap. This is less than $2. You can get a whole bunch of these bottles and throw one in your bug out bag. There are certain people that can't use that. Pregnant women, newborns, people who are allergic to shellfish or iodine, and people with thyroid disease. This is not long term. This is short term. 2 weeks max. You'll be using iodine, but then you need to figure out another way to purify your water. But for something that's quick, easy, cheap, available, this is great stuff. And it has it has other purposes. You can use this to treat a wound, to keep it from getting infected. And you can put this in water to make an irrigation solution for a wound. So you've all heard of betadine. We have that on our first aid list. Well, you can make betadine from iodine and clean water. So that's another option. This method, the SODIS method, solar disinfection, I love this method of purifying water because you are repurposing glass bottles or plastic bottles. I prefer glass myself because plastic can leach chemicals. You just need liter clear glass bottles. If you like red wine, that won't work because you've got to have a clear bottle.
Yeah.
Because it won't, the UV won't penetrate as well.
That's why it's.
So you fill this up 3/4 with water, shake it to oxygenate, and then fill it to the top. And you just lay it in the sun. And I was trying to find a nice piece of corrugated metal because a piece of corrugated metal makes a great thing to set this on. You set it in the corrugations, and the ultraviolet light from the sun penetrates through the glass and sanitizes the water, kills bacteria, kills protozoa, kills parasites. How easy is that to do?
Wow.
It's a very great method.
How long?
6 hours in direct sunlight, 12 hours on a cloudy day. And if you put it on a black surface or a reflective surface, it's going to work better because you're going to use the reflective power of the metal that you put it on to help sanitize the water. And I really looked for a standardized way of using hydrogen peroxide to purify water. I wasn't really able to find any method that's been validated, and I found that it's in 1/8 cup per gallon, but it said that for 32% and it said that for 3%. So it's all over. I'm not going to advocate using hydrogen peroxide because I don't have a way of knowing what's a standardized
You have to
method.
just go out of this country to do that research.
Okay. So, and it's not shelf stable either. So,
But this is another point with hydrogen peroxide. The regular hydrogen peroxide that you buy has additives in it that are not good to eat. You need food grade hydrogen peroxide, which usually comes at a much higher concentration, and that you can use for whatever you want to use the hydrogen peroxide for.
Gil's making the point that if you just go to the drugstore and buy 3% peroxide off the shelf, there may be additives in that, and that if you're going to use it, you need to use food-grade peroxide. And this is more important than learning how to set a broken arm or cure an infection, because this is what's going to prevent infection and illness in the first place. And I think that concludes my talk. All right, thank you for coming.